Before he became Augustus, before Rome called him Father of the Nation, before the empire was born, he was simply Octavian. And his story did not begin in Rome. It began in the ancient town of Velitrae. The family of the Octavii was not obscure. In Velitrae, their name carried weight. A street once bore it. An altar stood in honor of an ancestor who, in the midst of sacrifice to Mars, was attacked by the enemy. Without hesitation, he tore the half-burned entrails from the fire and offered them raw to the god, then marched into battle and returned victorious. From that moment, a law was passed. The entrails offered to Mars would forever be given in that same manner. Such was the legend attached to the bloodline of the man who would rule Rome.
The Octavi had once been admitted into the Roman Senate under King Tarquinius Priscus, and later elevated among the patricians by Servius Tullius. Yet, over time, the family faded from the highest rank, returning to the equestrian order. They were respectable, wealthy, ancient, but not imperial. Not yet. Octavian's father, Caius Octavius, was no common man. He rose through the magistracies with honor, governed Macedonia with firmness, and crushed rebellious forces descended from the chaos of Spartacus and Catiline. Letters from Cicero himself praised his justice and example. But fate was merciless. Before he could stand for the consulship, he died suddenly, leaving behind a young son not yet 4 years old. That child would one day change the world. On the 23rd of September 63 BC, during the consulship of Cicero, a boy was born on the Palatine Hill. His name at birth was Gaius Octavius. Later, as a child, he was called Thurinus. Few could have imagined that Rome's future rested in that small nursery in Velitrae, a modest chamber so feared in later years that men claimed terror seized those who entered it carelessly. Superstition followed him from the beginning. He lost his father at 4. At 12, he delivered a funeral oration for his grandmother Julia, the sister of Julius Caesar. And Caesar noticed him. When Octavian was barely a youth, he followed his great-uncle to Spain, crossing dangerous waters, surviving shipwreck, and marching through enemy territory to reach him. Caesar saw in the boy something rare: resolve, courage, calculation. When Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March, the Republic believed the threat had died with him. They were wrong again. For in Caesar's will, Octavian had been adopted as his son and heir. He was no longer merely Octavius. He became Gaius Julius Caesar. And soon, the Senate would learn what that meant. At just 19 years old, against the advice of his mother and stepfather, he returned to Rome and claimed his inheritance. He had no army, no office, no power, but he had a name, and that name was Caesar. Civil war followed. At first, he fought alongside Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate. Together, they hunted the assassins of Caesar. At Philippi, Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus fell. But victory did not bring peace. It brought blood, proscriptions, executions, confiscated lands, and resentment. Octavian was no longer a boy. He was becoming something colder, harder, necessary. He crushed rebellion at Perugia. He fought Sextus Pompey for control of the seas. Storms destroyed his fleets, but he rebuilt them. He defeated Pompey at Naulacus. He stripped Lepidus of power. One rival remained: Mark Antony. The final struggle came at Actium, a naval battle that would decide the fate of Rome. Antony and Cleopatra stood on one side, Octavian on the other. When the battle ended, Antony fled to Egypt. Octavian pursued.
At Alexandria, the war ended not with a speech, but with suicide. Antony fell upon his sword. Cleopatra followed. Egypt became a Roman province, and Octavian stood alone. He visited the tomb of Alexander the Great. When asked if he wished to see the tombs of the Ptolemies, he answered, "I wish to see a king, not dead men." It was not arrogance, it was ambition. Civil wars had ended, rivals were gone. The Republic lay exhausted. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him a new name, Augustus, the revered one. And with that title, the Roman Republic quietly became the Roman Empire. This was not merely the rise of a man, it was the birth of a new age, the age of emperors. The civil wars were over. Rome was exhausted, its enemies defeated, its rivals buried. But peace is not secured by victory alone. It must be enforced. Though now master of the Roman world, Augustus did not seek endless conquest for glory. In his youth, he had fought personally in Dalmatia and later in Cantabria, where he was wounded, once struck by a stone in the knee, another time injured when part of a structure collapsed upon him. After Antony's defeat, he rarely commanded directly in battle again. Instead, he ruled as a strategist. Cantabria was subdued, Aquitania pacified, Pannonia, Dalmatia, Illyricum, and Raetia brought under Roman control. The Alpine tribes, the Vindelici and Salicii, crushed. The Dacians were checked. The Germans were pushed back beyond the Elbe. Two tribes, the Ubii and Sicambri, were relocated across the Rhine. And yet, Augustus did not wage reckless war. He insisted Rome fight only when necessary. Tribal leaders were made to swear peace in the temple of Mars the Avenger. Hostages were taken, often women, knowing men could more easily be sacrificed by their own people. Even rebellious nations were treated with calculated restraint. Captives were sold into slavery, but never allowed to serve nearby, nor freed before 30 years. It was discipline through distance. His authority reached far beyond the sword. Ambassadors came from India and Scythia, lands Rome had only heard of in rumor. The Parthians, Rome's old eastern rivals, returned the military standards captured from Crassus and Antony. Armenia would have no king unless Augustus approved him. Without marching east, he bent the east to his will. The Temple of Janus, symbol of war, had been closed only twice in Rome's long history. Under Augustus, it was closed 3 times. Peace, real peace, settled across the empire. He celebrated triumphs for Dalmatia, Actium, and Alexandria. But even in glory, fate reminded him that Rome's power was not invincible. In Germania, disaster struck. 3 legions under Varus were annihilated in the forests. When Augustus received the news, he was shattered. For months, he let his hair and beard grow wild. He struck his head against doorposts, crying, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." The anniversary of the disaster became a day of mourning. Even emperors fear loss. He reformed the army with iron discipline. Mutinous legions were disbanded in disgrace. Cohorts that fled battle were decimated. Deserters were executed. He forbade generals to visit their wives except in winter. He abolished the old familiar address of fellow soldiers. They were soldiers, nothing more. Affection was replaced with order. Politically, Augustus reshaped the state. He seized the consulship at just 20 years old, backing his demand with legions stationed near Rome. A centurion, placing his hand on his sword before the Senate, declared, "If you will not make him consul, this will." And they obeyed. Over time, he held the consulship repeatedly, sometimes for full years, sometimes only briefly. He accepted lifelong tribunician power. He controlled legislation, religion, and moral oversight. Twice he considered restoring the Republic. Twice he decided against it. He knew what Rome was without a single guiding hand. It was chaos. Instead, he declared, "May I be remembered for establishing the Commonwealth on a safe and sound foundation." He would rule, but under the appearance of restoration. Rome itself changed under him. The city of brick became a city of marble. He built a new forum with the Temple of Mars the Avenger, where war and triumph would forever be decided. He erected the Temple of Apollo on the Palatine, the Temple of Jupiter Tonans. He built in the names of others, Livia, Octavia, his grandsons. He encouraged nobles to build and restore temples, theaters, porticos. He widened the Tiber to prevent flooding, organized fire brigades, repaired roads across Italy. 16,000 pounds of gold were placed in the Temple of Jupiter. The city reflected the empire, and the empire reflected him. Religious order was restored. He became Pontifex Maximus, burned false prophetic books, preserving only the Sibylline oracles, reformed the calendar, renamed the month Sextilis, August, after himself, revived ancient rites, strengthened the Vestal Virgins, and honored Rome's past generals with statues in his forum, declaring that future rulers must measure themselves against their example. Lawlessness was crushed, bandits eliminated, secret criminal societies dissolved, old debts that fueled corruption were burned, prosecutions driven by malice were punished. He added new classes of judges, sat in court personally, sometimes into the night. Even when ill, he judged from a litter, firm but often merciful. When a man accused of killing his father stood before him, Augustus asked gently, "Surely you did not kill your father?" For confession meant death, and Augustus preferred doubt to cruelty when possible. The man who had once presided over ruthless proscriptions in his youth had evolved, not softer, but steadier, measured, calculated. The Republic had fallen, the empire stood, and Augustus, the adopted son of Caesar, had done what no Roman before him could achieve. He brought order after chaos, peace after blood, stability after collapse, and in doing so, he reshaped history itself. The age of civil war ended with Caesar's death. The age of empire began with Augustus's rule, and Rome would never be the same again. Peace had been won. The legions obeyed him, the provinces bowed to him, the Senate feared him, and respected him. But Augustus understood something no Roman before him truly had. Power taken by force must be secured by law. And so he reshaped Rome, not with the sword, but with reform. He abolished certain outdated laws. He introduced new ones. A sumptuary law to restrain excess, a law against bribery in elections, a harsh law against adultery and moral corruption, and, most controversially, laws to encourage marriage and childbirth. Rome resisted. Widowers protested the waiting periods. Men avoided marriage to escape penalties. Some even married girls below the lawful age to evade the law's demands. Augustus responded with calculation. He allowed a 3-year interval after a wife's death. He increased the rewards for large families. He restricted easy divorces. At a public spectacle, the equestrian order loudly demanded repeal. Instead of arguing, Augustus summoned the young children of Germanicus, placing some upon his lap and others beside their father. He said nothing, but the message was clear. Rome's future depends on its children. The Senate itself required reform. After Julius Caesar's death, its ranks had swelled beyond 1,000, filled with men chosen by favor, bribery, or chaos. They were mockingly called Orcini, as though dragged up from the underworld. Augustus reduced their number, first by allowing senators to select each other, then, more ruthlessly, by presiding personally with Marcus Agrippa at his side. He is said to have worn concealed armor beneath his tunic, a sword at his waist, trusted men around him. No senator approached without being searched. Some were gently encouraged to resign. Others were removed. Those who remained entered the chamber differently now, offering incense and wine before taking their seats, meeting only on appointed days, speaking not in rehearsed order, but when called upon. No longer a mob of voices, but a disciplined body. He reorganized offices, created new magistracies to supervise roads, aqueducts, buildings, the Tiber, grain distribution, revived the long-forgotten office of censor, expanded the number of praetors, established a permanent military treasury funded by new taxes, ensuring veterans would not turn to rebellion in old age. He placed fleets at Misenum and Ravenna, established an imperial courier system so news from the edges of the empire could reach him swiftly. Even his seal evolved, from a sphinx to the head of Alexander the Great, and finally to his own likeness. Rome now bore his imprint in every detail. He strengthened the social order. Knights were required to account for their conduct. Some were disgraced. Most were reprimanded privately. Citizenship was guarded carefully. When Tiberius asked him to grant citizenship to a Greek client, Augustus refused without direct justification. When Livia interceded for a Gaul, he declined again, saying he would rather lose tax revenue than cheapen Roman citizenship. Even freed slaves were restricted from attaining full status if they had once been chained or tortured. He believed Rome must remain Roman. He corrected the seating of the theaters, senators in the front rows, knights separate, married plebeians distinct, boys apart from men, women confined to upper sections during certain spectacles. Order in entertainment reflected order in the state. He loved the games, chariot races, naval battles, hunts, even the Trojan games performed by noble youth. Yet he forbade needless cruelty in gladiatorial contests. He punished stage performers for indecency. He rewarded excellence generously. He attended the games attentively, never reading letters as his adoptive father once had done. When panic spread during one performance that the theater might collapse, he calmly moved to the most endangered section and sat there until the crowd quieted. Authority without fear. His generosity was immense, but measured. After the conquest of Egypt, money flooded Rome. Interest rates fell, land values rose. He lent funds without interest to stabilize the economy. He distributed gifts to citizens, sometimes 400 sesterces, sometimes less, even to young boys. But when the people grew greedy and demanded what he had not promised, he rebuked them publicly. "I shall now give you nothing." Firmness again. During famine, he expelled surplus slaves and foreigners to reduce strain. Yet he continued grain distribution, admitting later that, though he wished to abolish it, some future demagogue would surely restore it. He understood politics too well to pretend otherwise. He refused divine honors in Rome. Temples in the provinces could bear his name, but only alongside Rome's. Within the city, he melted down silver statues erected to him and dedicated the metal to Apollo. When urged to accept the dictatorship, he knelt, toga drawn back, and begged to be excused. He despised the title Lord. When actors on stage addressed him as such and the crowd applauded, he silenced them with a gesture, and issued a proclamation condemning the flattery. He walked the streets on foot during his consulships, visited senators by name, admitted plebeians freely, submitted himself to cross-examination in court, allowed even sharp criticism to pass without persecution. When a man declared openly he had the courage to stab him, Augustus merely fined or banished him lightly. To Tiberius, angered by insults against him, he wrote, "It is enough for us if no one can do us harm."
And then came the moment no ruler can manufacture. It must be given. Spontaneously, the Roman people offered him a new title, Father of his country. He refused at first. They insisted again, in a crowded theater. Finally, the Senate commissioned Marcus Valerius Messala to proclaim it formally. When Augustus heard the words, tears filled his eyes. He replied, "Having now reached the summit of my wishes, what more can I ask of the immortal gods but that this affection may remain with me to the last moment of my life?" He had not restored the Republic. He had replaced it. But he had done so without appearing to seize a crown. No king, no dictator, no tyrant. Only Augustus, the first citizen, the quiet founder of an empire that would endure for centuries. And thus, from the ashes of civil war, from the blood of Caesar, from the ruin of a broken republic, rose the Roman Empire. For more than 40 years, Rome had known only one master, not a king, not a dictator, but Augustus, the man who ended the civil wars, the man who turned brick into marble, the man who transformed a dying republic into an empire. And now, he was old. Age did what swords could not. His body weakened, but his mind remained sharp. He traveled to Campania in the final year of his life, accompanied by his wife Livia and a small retinue. At Nola, the same town where his father had once died, Augustus felt his strength fading. It was as if history had brought him full circle. He asked for a mirror. He had his hair combed, his cheeks adjusted. Even in death, presentation mattered. Then he asked those around him, "Have I played my part well in the comedy of life?" And added, "If so, applaud as I exit." It was not arrogance, it was awareness. He knew he had shaped an age. On the 19th of August, in the year 14 AD, Augustus died peacefully. He was 75 years old. Rome had not known stability like this in generations. Now, uncertainty returned. His body was carried from Nola to Rome. Along the route, magistrates and citizens bore it in procession. At night, it rested in basilicas and temples, guarded by honor and silence. In Rome, 2 funeral orations were delivered, one by his adopted son Tiberius and another by his grandson Drusus. The Senate decreed him divine. He became Divus Augustus, a god. The man who had refused temples in life now received one in death. But what was his true legacy? He left behind no crown, but he left something more powerful, a system. The Senate still met, elections still occurred, magistrates still held office, yet real authority rested with the emperor. He called himself princeps, first citizen. But the illusion was perfect. Rome believed it was still free. And that illusion would sustain the empire for centuries. He had reorganized the army, ensuring loyalty through pensions. He had stabilized the economy, reformed morality, secured borders, built roads, aqueducts, temples, established a postal system, created a professional civil service, guarded citizenship, encouraged birth, rewarded merit, restrained corruption, balanced mercy
with authority. He ruled not through terror, but through permanence. Yet he was not without shadow. The proscriptions of his youth, the ruthless elimination of rivals, the quiet exile of his own daughter Julia, the careful manipulation of succession. Augustus was not gentle. He was necessary. He understood something that Caesar never fully mastered. Power must not only be seized, it must be disguised. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he shattered the Republic. When he was assassinated, Rome descended into chaos. But when Augustus rose from that chaos, he did not attempt to restore the past. He built something new, an empire that would stretch from Britain to Syria, from the Rhine to the Sahara, an empire that would endure for centuries.
And so ends the story that began with Caesar's ambition and concluded with Augustus's design. One man destroyed the old order, another engineered its replacement. Together, they changed the course of human history. Rome would never be a republic again. It would be an empire, and the world would never be the same. If this series helped you see Rome differently, if it brought history to life, if you felt the rise, the betrayal, the transformation, then make sure you like this video. Comment below, was Augustus the savior of Rome, or the man who perfected its silent takeover? And if you want more cinematic history like this, subscribe, because the story of Rome is far from over.